Hey folks, Seth here. As we watch cities burn, statues being torn down, and calls to defund the police, if you haven't already, it may be time to think about personal protection. Guns Etc. has 10,200 square feet of guns, ammo, safes, and a staff that will work with you to find the best firearm for your situation. So stop by their huge store in Mesa or click on gunsetcetera.com and have access to over $400 million in firearms and accessories. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Welcome back and happy July 16th, 2020. I was quoting Alan Bloom yesterday from his 1987 landmark book, The Closing of the American Mind. And I was thinking again of it this morning as I was thinking of Plato's allegory of the cave as sketched out in The Republic, Plato's book, The Republic. I was thinking about the allegory because there's an interesting latter part to it that I didn't tell. You know the story. Let me remind, it bears on us directly and immediately just now. And let me point out the synchronicity here. Alan Bloom, prior to writing The Closing of the American Mind, wrote a definitive translation of Plato's Republic. Plato, one might say, moved passionately in and through the work of Professor Bloom. In the preface to his translation of the Republic, Plato's Republic, Dr. Bloom writes this, quote, "For students, the story of man bound in the cave and breaking the bonds, moving out and up into the light of the sun, is the most memorable from their encounter with the Republic. This is the image of every serious student's profoundest longing, the longing for liberation from convention in order to live according to nature, and one of the book's evidently permanent aspects. The story still exercises some of its old magic, but it now encounters a fresh obstacle. For the meaning of the story is that truth is substituted for myth. Today, students are taught that no such substitution is possible and that there is nothing beyond myth or narrative." Close quote. This is, of course, how you can replace self-evident truths and the truth with my truth or your truth or his truth or her truth. This is how, of course, you can take our founding from 1776, which was permanently fixed and understood, and put it 157 years earlier on an equal, if not favored, par of new scholarship. Let me stay on that just a second before I return to the cave. We conservatives have long revered Calvin Coolidge as much as the progressives revered, or I guess I can now say used to revere, Woodrow Wilson. That is until about a month ago when they discovered finally what we conservatives had been saying for years, that you progressives are worshiping a racist. Maybe someday they'll come around to that realization in Margaret Sanger too, but anyway, Coolidge. He spoke to what we thought of 1776 on its 150th anniversary, saying this, quote, "About the Declaration there is a finality that is exceedingly restful. It is often asserted that the world has made a great deal of progress since 1776, that we have had new thoughts and new experiences which have given us a great advance over the people of that day, and that we may therefore very well discard their conclusions for something more modern. But that reasoning cannot be applied to this great charter. If all men are created equal, that is final. If they are endowed with inalienable rights, that is final. If governments derived their just powers from the consent of the governed, that is final. No advance, no progress can be made beyond these propositions. If anyone wishes to deny their truth or their soundness, the only direction in which he can proceed historically is not forward, but backward toward the time when there was no equality, no rights of the individual, no rule of the people. Those who wish to proceed in that direction cannot lay claim to progress. They are reactionary. Their ideas are not more modern, but more ancient than those of the revolutionary fathers." Close quote. So too did we think the founding date of our country was final. But as Bloom put it, today's students are taught everything is myth and narrative, so why not replace the important of self-evident truths of equality and liberty and their date of 1776 with the importance of inequality and slavery and a much earlier date? Why not? Let me make this really clear. That was the whole point of 1776, to start what would become a new order of the ages, and to free us all that was philosophically and materially thought true before, that freedom and equality was not the case in the world or in the colonies, and now it would become so. Everything prior to 1776 was pre-freedom, pre-equality. 1776 changed it. Why people would want to reverse that with a project like 1619 and make the old, ancient understanding more true than what we left, slavery for freedom, inequality for equality, is ongoingly baffling to me. Unless that is the whole point, which it is. That, in the words of Andrew Cuomo, America was never that great. How do you make America never that great? That we were never a great country dedicated to freedom and equality. But it's a grand lie, just as the great leap forward was in truth a great leap backward. But back to the cave allegory, if I may, because it helps illustrate our problems. The concern arises from Book 7 in Plato's Republic. You have Plato putting it this way, as between what he calls the enlightened and unenlightened. Human beings are as if living in an underground den or cave which has a mouth open toward the light. Here they have been from their childhood, and they have their legs and necks chained so that they cannot move, and can only see before them, being prevented by the chains from turning around with their heads. Above and behind them a fire is blazing at a distance. And between the fire and the prisoners there's a raised path, and you will see if you look a low wall built along that path, like the screen which marionette players have in front of them, over which they show the puppets. Plato, in the voice of Socrates, continues, you have men passing along the wall carrying all sorts of vessels and statues and figures of animals made of wood and stone and various materials, which appear over the wall. Some of them are talking, others silent, and they see only their shadows. Glaucon says, how could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads, and of the objects which are being carried in like manner they would only see the shadows? And if they heard echoes of the passers-by, they would think those were original voices. Then of a sudden contemplate these shadow viewers and cave dwellers become liberated. Plato gives us what happens next. The prisoners are released and disabused of their error. At first, when any of them is liberated and compelled suddenly to stand up and turn his neck and walk and look toward the light, he will suffer sharp pains. The glare will distress him, and he will be unable to see the realities of which in his former state he had only seen of shadows. And then conceive someone saying to him that what he saw before was mere illusion, but that now, when he is approaching nearer to being and his eye is turned towards more real existence, he has a clearer vision. He sees things in reality. What will be his reply? Will he not be perplexed? Will he not fancy that the shadows which he formerly saw are truer than the objects which are now shown to him? And if he is compelled to look straight at the light, will he not have a pain in his eyes which will make him turn away to take in the objects of vision which he can see, and which he will conceive to be in reality clearer than the things which are now being shown to him? Will he not be tempted to look back into the darkness, in other words, for it is of less pain? You see what Plato is doing here. Once one is brought into the light, or enlightened, if you will, there's a shock. First a disbelief, sharp pains, glares of distress, and even an initial view that the reality is the false thing and the shadows he left are still the real thing. But he will slowly come around, and in short enough order, he will see things clearer than ever. He will be enlightened. And then Plato uses an interesting phrase about those who are enlightened and look back at their erstwhile cave dwellers who are still there. Quote, he would felicitate himself on the change and pity them. He would be felicitous of himself and have pity on the others, the tribe he used to belong to, felicity being happiness. He will be happy for himself and sad for the others. And then something else happens next. The liberated, the enlightened, the happy will want to explain to their chained brethren what they are seeing is a lie. They'll want to go back and explain to them that their entire existence of what they thought was real is not. They will go back into the cave, They will be blinded again by the darkness, for as happens when you move from immediate light to dark, and those who have stayed in the cave, those who have never seen the light, will think that the man coming back is being punished and harmed because his eyes aren't used to the dark. But the enlightened man will try to explain the folly to his chained brethren. And what will they do once he speaks? Plato says they will try to kill him. They will try to kill the truth teller. Think of the fate of Socrates for a moment when you think of that. Is this not precisely the problem we conservatives have today with the misled who sup at the table of Stygian darkness? They think we're the crazy ones, and they try to kill us politically, censor us, berate us, you name it. They don't want to hear it. So they live a lie. We know they live a lie. They think their lie is the truth, but the problem is this, and it's a big one, because as Bloom instructs, our entire culture really is the cave. And the people who think they are talking and speaking smart, though they are talking and speaking rot, take large swaths of the culture with them. It's not that they are men on an island. It's that they want to change the whole island and define it by falsehoods, by their myths and narratives, as it were. We point out what is happening in the real world, that there is ongoing persecution and slavery in China, let us say. They could care less and say the slavery part of our country once, that we once had here and rid ourselves of 160 years ago, is much more important, or the only reality, the only thing that is important and the only thing that is real, not what's going on in reality, in light, in China. We who esteem truth want to stand and sing tributes to our great country that has liberated so many. They say we cannot do so because of what some of us used to be, slaveholders. Meanwhile, they rake in millions of dollars, millions, tens of millions of dollars from the products of the current slave labor that goes on in China. This is the problem of the cave today. I wish to dedicate this monologue to my old boss, Jack Kemp, whose 85th birthday would have been this week. One of his favorite songs was America, or My Country 'Tis of Thee. He especially loved the last stanza. Our fathers' God to thee, author of liberty, to thee we sing. Long may our land be bright, with freedom's holy light. Protect us by thy might, great God, our King. I'm Seth Leibson. The lines are open.